Roll call, Mary?
Commissioner Brabant,
Here.
Commissioner Kralik,
Here.
Commissioner Lee,
Present.
Vice Chair Onan,
Here.
Chair Stinger,
Present.
Commissioner Smith,
Present.
Commissioner Shi.
Present.
Thank you.
Are there any agenda changes, requests, deletions? Okay, we will proceed. I have no cards for oral communications. I'd like to begin with item 1, ad hoc committee chairs. Any updates on your work plans? Commissioner Smith?
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank staff, Minka and Chairman Stinger for meeting over several weeks for intensive meetings to start crafting our community assistance, our community conversations. Pulling in my notes, give me 1 second, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, you're welcome. All right. What we're basically doing is we will have the topic for our first event will be February 28th. We will start promotion quite shortly. The topic will be gender equity. What does it mean here and now? We will basically have a format of a subject matter expert setting the table for discussion. We will have people sitting in rounds, having different questions and dialogue points around gender equity and what does that look like in today's climate. Like many things in the world, as things change, as time changes and as demographics in a community change, the uses of words or what people are looking for does change. So we want to really have a very open discussion to hear from all constituencies in Palo Alto speaking towards gender equity and their thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to Welcoming America Week. That was a completed activity. And also the Intro to Civic Engagement. We've worked with the library, or the library has taken that over, and we'll include a introduction to civic engagement on January 24th, Thursday. Do we have the speaker for that?
I believe that will be Kashayar Alayi, one of our staff members in the Development Center, formerly of the City Manager's Office.
I think we're all invited, or I hope we're all invited to that at Mitchell Park Library. And it'll be a trial to see how it fits into the educational series that goes on monthly from September until May or June. Any other updates? I clearly have an update on gender identity, but I'll hold that for next agenda item. To agenda item 2, report from the Committee on Inclusive Community being LGBTQ in Palo Alto. You have a presentation in your packet. So I'm just going to go over it very briefly to set the stage and then open up discussion. The report before you represents the work of a summer intern, Sabrina Proctor, combined with 2 subcommittees on the commission. The first subcommittee from 2017-18 fiscal year was composed of Commissioners Lee, Onan, and myself. And we were basically charged with an assessment phase. And that transitioned into a second ad hoc committee which is Commissioners Kralik, Lee, and myself, basically looking at implementation. There we go. This is the flow of the report and of our thinking. And as a background, we had a starting point, a statement of city values that you are all familiar with, that was passed by council in December 2016. What followed from that was a prioritization on our part of focus areas that we wanted to look at. And one of those was the LGBTQ population in Palo Alto. And that gave us the grounds to begin an assessment of strengths and vulnerabilities. The study plan is on the next slide, and that is basically the approach that we took. We looked at secondary reports, published data, statistics. We held with the county a listening forum, and we conducted a community survey and did some in-depth interviews. The data isn't perfect, and you'll see that of these limitations, well, I'll tell you, the limitation that I care most about is the lack of adult senior population data. The youth data is relatively available with some quirks in it, but the senior data is difficult to find. The reports that we used are shown here and on the next two slides. Basically, Project Cornerstone data and hate crime data from the Palo Alto Police Department. Population estimates are imprecise, but basically we're looking at 4 to 6% of our population which identifies as LGBT. It's not the population estimates that are important to us, however. It's really that some of our LGBTQ plus peers face life-threatening issues. And these become a call to action for groups such as Adolescent Counseling Services, Family and Child Services, and Project Safety Net, and for Stanford Children's Hospital as well. They do a good job. They offer professional counsel, and they have outreach. Project Safety Net had a focused community meeting last year during June, supporting and partnering with LGBTQ youth, what it truly means to be an ally. Did I lose my, I'm going to keep on moving, I'll tell you. Yeah. I'm on slide issues are life-threatening. I just wanted to illustrate in this slide the difference in the experience our LGBT youth have compared to the general high school population. And moving on, to further call it out, these are some of the stats. LGBTQ youth average only 18 out of 40 assets as compared to 21.4 assets for all students surveyed. They are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide, 1.5 times more likely to use drugs and alcohol, and fewer than 22% report positive family communications. Again, these are areas that Project Safety Net, Adolescent Counseling Service are doing sound work to change these harsh statistics. That was basically what we learned from our secondary data, secondary published reports. We went on to a community listening forum a year ago, or 8 months ago. And to reiterate, we're indebted to the County Office of LGBTQ Affairs for providing the structure and the support to conduct the listening forum, complete with a recorder. And here you, oh, well, you won't. But in your printed copy, you see the cover slide that she did, and the last slide that she did of what we heard. So what we learned can be summed up in the next slide, that there are some strengths and there are some vulnerabilities. Progressive attitudes and talk are not always matched in the LGBTQ experience. Discussion question 4 was, what do you think should be the top priorities that we, the Office of LGBTQ Affairs, the City of Palo Alto, and community members can do together to improve the lives of LGBTQ individuals, the families, and the communities? And from that discussion, we have 3 priorities: diversity training, safe space, community conversations. It should also be noted here that the county office, and this is not shown in the slides, do have a county-wide initiative on de-escalating or dealing with hate crimes. So one of the discussion questions was this: LGBTQ individuals sometimes experience violence and can be victims of crime. Often these crimes go unreported. What can we do to prevent hate crimes from happening? What can we do to encourage victims to report crimes? And how can we better support LGBTQ victims of crime? And the top responses from the participants at the listening forum were better reporting, anonymous tip lines, bystander training, and more police interactions, training or communication to explain how hate crimes impact individuals, and maybe walking with a cop. Moving on from the listening survey, we also conducted a community survey that was initiated at the listening forum and remained open until June. We had 108 responses. Oh, and we're back. You're back, so. The listening forum, two recordings from that, the summary, survey start. And what did we learn from the community survey? It basically reinforced some of the things that we know. Most people in Palo Alto are accepting, but LGBT experience negative behaviors which they attribute to their identity. And people still make hurtful mistakes. It isn't easy being an ally. From here, our direction is shown to be youth and transgender individuals, particularly cultural events, exhibits, festivals, recreation classes, sports leagues. And moving from the quantitative data to the qualitative data, comments enrich the quantitative results. There is an invisibility that stems from the absence of awareness of LGBTQ specific concerns and can result in community misunderstandings. So what we have at this point is a reasonable underpinning to any recommendation we want to make. We have legislation, we have generally supportive community attitudes, and we have some models for space. Although, as we reiterate a couple times in this presentation, these spaces are at a distance from North County. We have some vulnerabilities. The most significant one that was expressed by youth is the ability to communicate with immediate family and their ability to feel integrated into the broader community, or feel integral, feel central to the broader community. And the vulnerability that we can't ignore is the absence of space. So seeking an avenue for the HRC to have added value to the programs that are currently going on in the community and to the needs that were expressed, this seems to sum up the current situation and provide a vision. It feels invisible, but not hostile. What we need is to enhance community awareness and education. So the recommendations that we're making, and that I will take some time with, are to convene a Palo Alto LGBTQ summit, to build a structure that would formalize an advisory body, and leverage the expertise and involvement of existing service providers and agencies, to focus efforts on programming, visibility, and space, and to develop messaging, and to use some early programs as pilots and bridges to hopefully establish something. Well, I guess what we're saying there is to start small and see where we can expand our efforts. The sequence is described here, but I just want to emphasize that the tone is to start small, piloting programs, and I'm using programs in a general sense, not a human services or not an Office of Community Service sense of a program being an ongoing, repeated event, looking more at just programming in the general jargon. We want to start small, see how we do, measure outcomes, and then pursue further programs. The pivot point is this. At the outset, we were holding a listening forum, and we wanted to identify one program, one event, one resource that we could recommend to the community services. And actually, in that regard, the community services has done a training, a sensitivity training for summer recreation staff. But as we looked at the programs, we saw there were so many rich ideas that we didn't want to just let them go. They're way beyond the scope and the charge of the HRC, but we hoped that if we brought together service providers, we could see what kinds of partnerships we could leverage, what kind of alliances could accomplish something more. And the hope is from this group that's assembled, we can set a priority and carry that through with the direction of a formal advisory board. So with that, we move to the summit objectives, and that is what the subcommittee, Commissioner Lee, Commissioner Kralik, and I are working on right now. A rough timeline is to go away. Well, you'll have to, looking at the paper, the rough timeline for the road ahead is to have our working meeting in February, and then to continue on to activity plans and a implementation in the second half of the year. I do want to make some acknowledgments right now. First to someone who is not here. Sabrina Proctor worked very diligently as a summer intern with Human Services. Thank you for allowing her to spend time on this. Julie Solomon, who's here, thank you, from the Mountain View HRC, was a guiding light. I piggybacked off of a lot of what resources you had identified and shared so generously. Minka and Mary helped immensely setting up our listening forum and helped me this summer with identifying a work plan for our summer intern. Commissioners Lee, Onan, Kralik in the past and moving forward. And a huge outreach to the Santa Clara County. Maribel Martinez, the director, has been immensely helpful, not only in doing the listening forum, but in answering questions that I've had along the way and giving me feedback. So I'd like to open it up now for our commission. Are there any questions, or do I have any oral comments before I move to?
Do I need to hit a button? I don't know. It's on. Oh, it's on. There we go. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Julie Solomon. I'm a resident of Mountain View, and I'm the chair of the Mountain View HRC. I served as Chair Stinger referenced, I served on Mountain View HRC's LGBTQ plus Needs and Assets Assessment Subcommittee from 2016 to 2018, and we wrapped up our subcommittee work in September of 2018. Thank you very much for the acknowledgement. I would like to thank Chair Stinger and Vice Chair Onan. Thank you very much for your support of our needs and assets assessment process and for your participation in the community listening forum that we held in collaboration with the County Office of LGBTQ Affairs, and also for your participation in other public meetings that we held about this topic. I also attended the Palo Alto LGBTQ listening forum that was referenced earlier, and from my perspective, it was very well attended and very well run with productive breakout discussion, and I really appreciated the ideas that were shared there, which helped to inform our Mountain View assessment. We in Mountain View had similar data sources and limitations to those that were presented this evening for Palo Alto. We also had a number of similar findings. In relation to the recommendations, I cannot speak on behalf of the Mountain View HRC because they haven't had an opportunity to see and discuss the presentation, but I would like to say that as an individual with experience doing this kind of assessment, I am familiar with this kind of data and support these recommendations. Also, I want to mention that in September 2018, the Mountain View HRC recommended to our City Council that we explore opportunities to partner with others to identify a Mountain View or other North County location for LGBTQ plus community services. And Chair Stinger's presentation, the ad hoc subcommittee's presentation, referenced the lack of community space and services here in North County as well. And so I want to say that I'd be happy to help facilitate dialogue about potential opportunities across our cities and here in Mountain View with county, with city, and other stakeholders. So thank you very much and best wishes for your work ahead.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your offer. I'd like to turn it over to the commission to ask if there are any questions about the information that's herein. Anything you expected to hear but did not hear? Please.
Yeah, so one thing that or a couple things that I noticed that I was surprised by, there was mention about hate crimes against LGBTQ people, but the reality is most crime against LGBTQ people occurs in the context of the family. And I didn't see any references to family violence, domestic violence, and I think that would be a really key thing to add. And secondly, we have a very serious problem in Palo Alto where some communities in the city are more progressive, whether that's for social, cultural, ethnic, or religious reasons, but we have more traditional cultures within the city as well who are not friendly to LGBTQ people. And I didn't see any acknowledgement of that or any plan for how to help people within those more traditional cultures who are LGBTQ, or how to educate their family members who may be very negative toward them. And that's another important thing to bear in mind, I believe.
Thank you for both of those. I totally agree. The first piece, the family violence, the domestic violence, we have anecdotal data but not statistical data, and we need to do a better job of reporting that and capturing that, and we will try to going forward. We have identified some programs. Let me see if I have it here. There's an educational program, Family is Still Family, Parenting in a Complex World, that we'd like to take out to as a program to more traditional families, and so we'll present that as a priority to the joint group. And there's probably more that we need to identify also. Those are good calls. Thank you.
Chair Stinger. First, I'd like to thank you for your spectacular leadership and all the commissioners that worked on this. I'm really very encouraged also about the intra-city work with Mountain View, because it is not a city problem. It's a cultural problem, so we have to reach across communities. I would like to second Commissioner Jill Onan's point. we do live in a community that's 34% Asian, 7% Latino, 2% Black, and what we do find is that cultures perceive LGBTQ issues in very different ways. So as the one thing I found in organizing in the city of Palo Alto is when we do things, events become very self-selecting. So I think the challenge moving forward is how do we broaden the umbrella to invite others in that wouldn't traditionally come to these events, because we do have a progressive city, but we don't want to talk to those that are already advocates, but we want to open the doors to others that are curious or might have questions. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Lee.
So I think my comment at this point would be, I know that the recommendation in the presentation by the Community Services Department focuses on programming, visibility, and space. I think that's just one of many tools in our toolbox at our disposal. I think programs and visibility and space are a key component of that, and I look forward to engaging with various community partners to have sort of educational programs that engages with different segments of our community, in particular the traditional segments of our population who may not be used to talking about these issues and engaging with them on that. But I also think that there are other tools in our toolbox, specifically with regards to social services. I mean, we do provide grant funding to various agencies that provide services. A lot of them are already doing great work to address some of the issues that the survey presented. And I just would like us to continue to think about these survey results as we go into the season of allocating funding to those various agencies, and look for opportunities to partner up with them or partner them with each other so that we can further focus on these issues. In particular, mental health and the intersection with the LGBTQ community is particularly striking, and is something that I think this community has set as a huge priority. I also think that there are some opportunities for policy recommendations as well. We are a policy advisory body to the council, and during our listening forum, one of the things that was listed as sort of a top priority was really taking stock of policies and resources. And certainly we're going to be taking stock of the resources available through the city and through various other agencies through our working summit. But to the extent that we can identify opportunities to improve policies, I think we should play a role in that as well. And our committee has discussed one possible recommendation, which hopefully we'll bring to the full commission in February or March. Just as a preview of that, it would involve updating the city's non-discrimination policy to explicitly include gender identity and gender expression, which were not included when the policy was first passed about 15 years ago. And so, I really look forward to the programming aspect of it, but I want us to think broadly and think of all the different tools within our toolbox so that we can have as broad and deep of an impact as possible.
Thank you.
Chair Singer, can I ask staff a question?
Please.
Is it within the breadth of this body to recommend that the city do certain marketing and outreach?
For specific HRC events, or what are you referring to?
There is a slide on page 10. Well, there are two slides on the top. The top slide on page 10 includes, that's the invisibility and limits of community understanding. Mm-hmm. And it's the two statements that jump out at me. It says, I'm queer identified and have worked in Palo Alto for 6 years, and have truly zero conception of what the vibes in terms of the LGBTQ plus community here. It feels invisible but not hostile. Also, above there, it said, I would love to see an annual Palo Alto Pride event, or at least for one of our existing city street fairs or parades, to have a significant LGBTQ plus components. The visibility is important for me and my family. I think, if we could recommend, and my question is there a way for us to recommend the city do more outreach or do more marketing or talk to city council? I don't know the process, so I'm asking staff for advisement.
Right, I think, so the commission works more on the policy aspect of it, and staff works more on the operational. So if it's a policy recommendation that the HRC recommend that the city look more into offering more programs and services for the LGBT community, that's one aspect of it. Specifically saying we want it to be a parade, we want it to be this, we want it to be that, that's something, that operational aspect of it is what staff would do, but the overall arching policy or intention could come from the HRC. I will say that this is something that we could continue to have a conversation with the subcommittee, because oftentimes the subcommittee, just in dialogue with staff, there's often things that staff are already thinking about doing, so it doesn't need to get to the sense of, making an official policy and having that go to council and then possibly back to staff. So that would be the answer that I have at this point.
And that's one of the purposes of the working summit, is to see sort of where the various city departments that may have a role on this issue, and the various stakeholders in the community, what are they currently thinking, what are they doing, what do they see as the issues, and then work collaboratively to see how we may address them, as opposed to sort of dictating.
Right, what I'm interested in, and how I see the value in working with the providers in the community. So you've heard, you've done some analysis of information. You have the survey results, we have the listening forum results. And the value of the summit is really testing some of those ideas with the agencies and key representatives that work with our LGBT community or work on those issues in the community, to say, these are some ideas and thoughts that come out. What value did you see in some of them? Or they could say, yeah, we were going to do that anyway if the city wants to partner with us, or if the HRC wants to partner with us, or 3 agencies work together to do so. So I'd really, as a first step, I'm in support of taking some of these ideas that have come out of this analysis work and running it first past these stakeholders to see where we can go from there, because they could easily say, we'll take that on. But to go to your point again, the HRC can't specifically say to staff, I'd like you to plan an LGBT pride event. I mean, as far as, going to council and saying, the HRC did this report, we feel strongly about having more visibility. Our recommendation is the city has more visibility in planning events inclusive of the LGBT community, and it kind of goes from there.
Okay, thank you so much.
And as a specific reference to our authority, I think the one that would speak most directly to your concern is Section E, which says to coordinate programs of the commission with similar programs by private and public agencies and organizations. So, yeah.
So with regards to that space requirement for the LGBTQ community center, is it possible to find a space between Mountain View and Palo Alto border, which can work for both the cities? And
we haven't even gone that far. I think that's, again, an idea that needs to be tested out at this forum idea. But are you asking specifically if there's a city space, or if there's been discussions about where it might be?
no, I was asking if there's a city space, or if there, in the past, whether we have worked with City of Mountain View to split the rent for a city, run operation where both the cities could use a space, common space kind of thing.
There might be within some other entities within the city that have done some joint programming. I think the idea of having an ongoing space is something that requires a lot of conversation, and it's a lot more complex than people might imagine. So I'd hate to say a yes or a no, or this might be possible, that might be possible, because I think there's a lot more thinking that needs to be done, and that's another, operational decision that, that is beyond the capacity of the HRC to say specifically, we want you to have a space. It could be a recommendation that goes to council to see if there's support of the city in that capacity. But
I think it's important, too, that we not lose sight of the county's role. For example, some years ago, people in the North County were complaining that they couldn't even sign up for Social Security and other types of benefits because the county offices in San Jose were so far away and so hard to get to. So some years ago, not that long ago, a county satellite office was established in Mountain View for the whole North County. And that's been a huge boon to people who live in the North County who are disabled, frail, unable to travel as far as San Jose. It's just a convenient outpost that we have now. And I know Joe Simidian was very supportive of that. So we now have a county office of LGBTQ affairs, again, based in San Jose, and the Billy DeFrank Center for LGBTQ people, also based in San Jose. So could conceivably North County cities like Palo Alto, Mountain View, Sunnyvale could possibly have a conversation and then reach out even to our county partners and see if a space can be identified, just as we've done in the past with things like social services. It's not out of the question, but as Minka has said, it's complicated and roles have to be thought out and funding has to be procured. But I'm sure we could reach out to Joe Simidian and have some preliminary talks and possibly get the ball rolling on that at some point soon.
We have identified some legislative funding sources that would maybe allow us to proceed that way. It's just so vague that it didn't belong in this discussion, but it would be something to pursue, to have some access to space in North County.
I kind of liked Commissioner Brombaught's comment, and I think, one of the things that the subcommittee talked about was, what are the summit objectives? Because that's the next step. And, I think when you look at the findings here in this report, the community space, safe space, et cetera, is a major finding. And so, it's possible that we could, share that finding with the folks at the summit and get some of their ideas. And, it could be as simple as, inviting community groups or organizations. I was just thinking, just kind of off the top of my head, and saying, what about a basketball tournament at the Y, celebrating LGBTQ safety or something like that, where you could talk to these folks and you could, as HRC, partner with them and maybe even, talk to them about trying to promote it. Start small, see what can be done now with what we've got. But I like that objective. It's an important one to take cognizance of, and certainly the direction of interfacing with Mountain View, pooling resources is something that's good. There is, I think, a safe community space in San Mateo. I don't know, Steve, if you've got some thoughts about that, because I did hear a presentation from them. Have you had the chance to visit there?
I did. I did attend an event at the San Mateo Pride Center, and they actually used some state, I think, health innovation funds to get that funded, and it brings together the various agencies which provide services to the LGBTQ community. And I think they got something like 3 years worth of funding to try it out.
Have we reached out to any clergy or churches that to see? I know there are a lot of church buildings in Palo Alto with a lot of clergy that are very supportive of the LGBT community because they're members of that community, or they are very supportive and they have building space, so they might be.
Yeah, I don't think we've done that outreach yet, but those might be the kinds of people we invite to the summit.
Okay.
Yeah, when
Those
we
kinds of
did the
stakeholders.
listening forum, there were some members of the faith community that expressed interest, and so I've been dialoguing with them, and they would be included. But the list is incomplete.
Okay, we'll talk.
I did have another concern about a constituency that may be overlooked in the current plan that seems to be focused on service providers. That would be parents of transgender children who are younger than adolescent age. I've heard from a number of parents that of young transgender children, say elementary or middle school age, who are very concerned about the bullying and the lack of administrative compassion for their child. Several of them said that they felt people at the school district needed more training in dealing with their children and that better education needed to be done in the schools. That's outside of HRC purview because the school district is separate from us, but I'm concerned that that type of situation won't be covered by adolescent counseling services. Those kids are too young, but those parents, they may have their own support group or they may have contacts or some sort of resources within the school district, and I think we should definitely check on that and make sure we're not overlooking a very vulnerable population and failing to represent them.
There were at the listening forum some parents of young transgender children, so there would be a starting point for that.
And that actually takes me to the third question I had, and I think we've covered some of the others. Other suggestions of organizations that we should include in the support groups, in the family support groups, the community support groups. Oh, I just turned it off. Thank you, sorry. I'm pressing it in the wrong sequence. What I started to say was, that was a lead-in to the next question I had, which was other avenues of exploration that we might be missing. The support groups, the faith groups are people we've touched on, but we need to firm up that list. Any other suggestions would be appreciated, and you can forward them to Minka as you think about them, and she will forward them to us. If there are no other comments, I think I will just thank my committee members, and we'll look forward to coming back to you in February with more detail. Let's see. I think we are on agenda item 3, which I seem to have lost. You're right, I did, thank you.
So I can handle the introduction for that if you like, Chair. Okay. So this is, as you see from the agenda introduction item that was included in your packet. So this is on the agenda at the request of Commissioners Lee and Bromblad. As you remember, at the November meeting, we had a large contingent from the RISE Commission come to the HRC to speak about their work at the school district. And at the end of that discussion, there was an interest by the commissioners that I previously mentioned to bring this back on the agenda to see if there is interest by the HRC to either continue some kind of relationship or involvement in the work of the school district. The assistant superintendent said that part of their work will include that of a committee in that community members are invited to participate in. There's a community role on it. You'll see many of the bullet points listed are things that are happening on the campus that are very specific to specific regulations, Title IX, that they are required to keep in compliance with. But there is an opportunity for community involvement. When I was in dialogue with the assistant superintendent, it's been a couple weeks now, they had not set their January meeting, and I looked on the website today, and it did not look like they had set their January meeting. So the HRC can have a dialogue if there is interest in continuing work as far as the issue that is under, that the RISE committee brought to you, which is, promotion of a culture in which sexual assault, violence, and harassment are not engaged in or tolerated. As I mentioned in my report, an official liaison relationship. Since this is a school district committee, that's not really appropriate for the HRC to have an official liaison. If you just put the semantics and, take away the official liaison, there's nothing that prohibits the HRC from sending a member to be, to listen at their meetings, to hear what they're doing, to bring back that conversation to the HRC, to see if there's avenues for mutual assistance. I also put back that, as I looked at the HRC's work plan, because I am cautious that this is something that's additional, and there were still several items from your work plan that we talked about tonight that there weren't updates on. So there's still things on the work plan that still need to be accomplished, and I'm cautious about adding something new when what you established in August is still a work in progress. So I thought if you wanted to do something, it might be thought of best under the work of gender equity, which you have listed as a priority. But at this point, I turn it back to the chair to oversee the conversation from here.
Do we have any public comment?
So, I wanted to add something to that. Like, I have had conversations with different parents and things, and I think something that was discussed at that point was, during the presentation, a part of it was to bring in more education on these issues at the elementary school level, which, I think in short, what I'm saying is, like, I do have some feedback on a portion of their presentation that day, which it would be good if, we could give back to them. But I'm neutral as to whether we have an ongoing thing with where we go on. Discussing
I guess I would say a couple things. If, as a parent of a PAUSD student, and if your feedback more is in the guise of, as a parent in the district, I would just suggest that you work directly or attend directly the RICE committee or provide your feedback directly to PAUSD. I think what we're thinking of here is, as a commission, in your role in the city to do, be concerned about issues, women's issues. Is there a role for the HRC to be involved with this committee, or is there a role to take some of the issues they're working on to say, community-wide, is there something we would like to add value to it? But
I wanted to address that comment. I think it is not a personal feedback from me as a parent. It is, what I heard from several different parents who were talking on these issues. And I think the goal of HRC is to be the voice of the people and give feedback to on different issues. So,
But it's not really the HRC's. I'm just trying to understand the HRC's role to give feedback to a school district committee. I mean, based on anecdotal comments from the community. I would leave that to the commission to work on.
They were not anecdotal. When you're using the word anecdotal comments from different parents, well, it was not a formal feedback saying, hey, you are a member of HRC and this is your form. There was no written paper saying this is a formal feedback, but it was in no means anecdotal. These are, personal feedback about people experiencing this sexual education for their kids in the school district. And this is valuable feedback, and I don't see why you are kind of limiting that to oh, this is, as a parent, this is your personal thing. And I want to say it's not my personal feedback. It's what I heard from
Right.
In
I'm
different
just trying to
meetings,
understand
in different
the-
situations from different people.
Sure, and,
Yeah.
and I hear you, and I appreciate that. I'm just trying to take what you're saying and looking at the role of the HRC in providing that comments back to the school district, so.
I mean, I feel it is, if I'm involved in this committee and I'm hearing from that side, I feel it's my legal duty to kind of bring back to them whatever I'm hearing from the people and, give that feedback. My feedback may not be given that much weight if it were just coming from a random parent. If it is coming through somebody through the HRC, it may be
Right.
given more weight. And
Right.
so my interest in giving feedback through the HRC to that is so that it gets the proper attention.
Right. So
Yes.
then, if you wanted it through the HRC, then that would have to be a decision by the HRC that was a message that they wanted to pass on to the school district committee. So if you went to the, you could go to the RISE committee and you could speak as an individual person, or as an individual person, you could say you're a member of the HRC, but unless you are designated by the commission, you cannot speak on behalf of the commission.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I have always understood that to be the case. Since we are talking about whether we should have an ongoing relationship where we are monitoring their meetings and giving them feedback, I wanted to, also bring this to the attention of the commission that whether we go for the ongoing or not, I would like to give like one portion of the feedback for one part of that.
If I could jump in here for a second, if there was a specific school district policy that we either wanted to support or provide feedback on, I think that would be within our authority. If we look at 2.22.060F, it says that we can recommend or oppose legislation other than that of the city, provided that the city council has not taken an official position with respect to such legislation. We certainly have done that with regards to state legislation pending and passed. And so I think interpreting that provision very liberally, as the code permits us to do, if there was a specific policy proposal or existing policy that the school district was implementing or considering in response to this task force, I think that would be an opportunity, certainly for this commission to weigh in if our colleagues wanted to do
I
so.
guess I would have
So-
a question about that I'd like to ask to staff. In this case, we have a standing committee between the council and the school board,
That's correct.
and it seems like we would want to take it perhaps there. With some state legislation, we don't have a standing committee, so a comment would be taking a different avenue. So I'm not sure quite how I would interpret that
And I'd be
code with regard
concerned
to
about
this
the word of
issue.
legislation. I mean, they are not, when I think what this is referring to is state or local legislation, I don't know if I would use that same terminology for a procedure at the school district.
But I think the fundamental question outside of the school district is the issue around sexual assault and sexual abuse at a primary level that this commission should do something. And should we continue to examine it, whether that's intertwined with the school or not? One of the things that has deeply troubled me over the last 6 months to 12 months is the vulnerability of women after they've been assaulted and not having reporting and not understanding where to go and how culture perceives that. If we're truly concerned about human relation, outside of, I'm not going to tell us how to, I don't have a penny in that fight with the PAUSD. That's not my department. But I would recommend that this is if not a significant, but a primary issue for us moving forward, even if we don't put it on the docket this year, and just do some exploratory stuff and then bring it back at a retreat in June and make it a primary issue. But I am one that believes that this needs to be a primary issue at some point, if not today, within the next span of months.
And one of the things that the school district did recently as part of this process is they took stock of sort of everything that they were doing district-wide, by each site to see what they were currently doing to address these issues. And they found that there were a lot of things that they were already doing, which they just didn't know about. And then from there, really evaluating what additional steps or modifications they needed to take. And in my conversations with Karen Hendricks, the deputy superintendent, she definitely saw an opportunity to partner with the city on some of the programmatic aspects of what they are working on. Towards the end of last year, they really focused a lot on educational pieces, and they plan on meeting with some of their principals in January to sort of get some feedback on how those educational pieces work. And then based on that feedback, they will be engaging with any interested stakeholders to see what sort of collaborations we can take. I agree with you, Coloma. This is something that we should prioritize. I think, when we talk about the culture around sexual assault and all these things, they're not just issues constrained to the school. I mean, these kids they go to school most of the day, but they live in our community, and the tone that we set as adults can either reinforce or undermine some of those efforts. So I definitely see an opportunity and a responsibility for the city to find ways to engage with the school district on some of the programmatic aspects. When we look at the WISE Task Force's charge, there's about 5 of them. I think the first and fifth ones probably we want to steer clear of, but in terms of 2 through 4, education of the community about rights and responsibilities, promotion of a culture in which sexual assault, violence, and harassment are not engaged and or tolerated, and empowerment of all community members to interrupt and report incidents of assault, violence, and harassment. Those are things that aren't constrained purely to the school district and are things that we as a city and as a commission should do. And so I would recommend that at this point, if we want to subsume this under sort of the existing gender equity work that I'm the lead on this year, I'd be happy to continue engaging with the school district, attending their meetings, and just seeing where those opportunities may exist. We certainly want to make sure that there's buy-in from the school district for any sort of involvement that we play, and so I can keep my ear to the ground and continue to participate in those discussions and come back to the commission periodically. And so, my recommendation would be that we, as a body, permit me to continue those conversations as not necessarily the commission's liaison, but as someone who is permitted to work on it and bring back some thoughts as they arise.
I just wanted to mention that not every child goes to public school.
Yeah.
And, we are broader than the school district. And in a sense, if they have an effort that we can take advantage of by hearing reports from, we can draft policies that are broader, that could encompass more children at schools. Children also don't just go to school, they do other things, they go places where, harassment occurs, assault occurs, and, that's something that we can look into as well. I'm sure that, we've seen the statistics about, the hundreds of complaints that have emanated from the complaint procedure at the public schools. But, getting buy-in from private schools is important. And that's another way in which, without being frictional to the, subcommittee of the council that interacts, I mean, we can still listen to the RISE presentation and still come up with our own policy that can guide our community. In some ways, it doesn't have to be second to the RISE effort. It can, take advantage of what we think might be limitations and too much focus and broaden that out. So again, I want to say to Commissioner Brombach, I think it's a good thing to listen to the community. And I do like the fact that you've received these comments. It sounds like you have a good pulse on your community. Maybe this is a forum, a listening forum is certainly something that could be something that we've done, I know on LGBTQ, could be done on this same issue as a community and as a commission.
So I'd like to jump in kind of on the other side a bit. The school district did a very poor job handling several cases of sexual assault that occurred on campus and off. They are now they've had to spend millions of dollars on legal fees, and they've really created themselves a wound that they now have to heal. I think this commission should be very cautious about stepping in the middle of that. The school district has a lot of work to do to rebuild trust with parents and with students. Their staff needs massive training. They had to hire a whole new administrative person just to oversee compliance because they were not even complying with the law. So there's a lot of complex issues here. And I know that parents particularly have strong feelings about what's happened in the public schools, but they are beyond the HRC purview. It is a very sticky situation, and we've already had a couple people come to our meeting and basically yell at us to do something because feelings are running so high. And it could put us in a position where people are coming and admonishing us and browbeating us around things that we really don't have any authority over. And we also don't have, millions of dollars to spend on solving this problem. So I'm just going to be the voice of caution that I agree this is a very, very important issue, and I feel terrible for the young girls who were assaulted, and I feel a bit angry at the school district for not handling it better, but those lessons are being learned, and there's a point where I'm not sure how much we can really add to what's already underway.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Commissioner Onan that, the school district is really messed up in the past, and I think, I think the problem is bigger, the culture in the school districts, and this is a personal comment, my son just entered middle school, and both my husband and I, we are, shocked by some of the cultural things that are going on in his middle school, and we never appreciated the elementary school principal. He's very, very good, but when they jump to middle school, and I'm thinking high school just gets worse. It's the culture of the city, and I mean, I'm disappointed at the culture of the city, and so it's not just what's at the school. I think what they are seeing is the culture coming from the city, and so it is in some ways an HRC problem. Whether we want to fix that or not, I don't think it's a fix in a year or two. It's a long-term thing that needs to happen. But
I think one of the responsibilities of any commission, particularly one around human relations, is getting into the difficult stuff. The reality, I do agree with Commissioner Onan that we should not couple our work to the school board or the school system because there's legal and financial ramifications there. One of the things I think people don't truly clearly understand is that nowhere in somebody's life is the laws on sexual assault or what sexual assault is explained to people. So if a child or somebody comes to them and says this is sexual assault, they don't even clearly understand what their next recourse or step as a parent, as a victim, as a person, as somebody in private school is dealing with. So I think as a commission where we now live in a time of Me Too, we've seen assaults, rapes, judged. There's numerous different community things. As a community, I think deferring to the school system for a response from the city or from a human relations perspective would be abdicating our duty. I would agree with Commissioner Nan. We don't want to get involved with the school district thing, but I think it is important to say, A, we understand the pain that victims have. B, we understand that people in our community have a lot of perceptions, conceptions that might not be correct, so that's an educational opportunity. And how do we start healing and talking around those values in our community? And I think this is a task our board or our commission is well equipped for.
This may be anecdotal, but what were you shocked and surprised at in the middle school?
No, it's just, the vocabulary and different, actions he'll ask, like, what does this mean? What does that mean?
Was it the curriculum, or was it just the students?
No, vocabulary. Just the people.
Vocabulary.
Yeah, the people. It's more about the 8th graders thinking what is cool. It's not cool to be in a math club. There are 3 kids, and so they are stopping the math club because there were just 3 kids attending. From 10 kids it went down to 3 kids because it's not cool to do math. It's all, and whereas in the competing, other communities around, there's actually a competition to get into math clubs. So math teachers have to take tests as to who are good at math. To kind of, you have 40, 50 kids wanting to join the math club, and the teacher has to say no. In just our surrounding cities, we don't have to go too far. Whereas in Palo Alto,
Let's come back to that.
Yeah.
Because that's really interesting and probably worse on a gender perspective, too. I guess I see this as an action item, agenda item, and I've listened to the discussion. I'm going to make a proposal to continue this. I also agree with the statement that the compliance issues in bullet 1 and the methods for rectification in bullet 5 are probably the bulk of what the RISE committee has to spend its time on. The education of the community, the promotion of culture, the empowerment of all community members seems like something we could pull out and deal with ourselves, not deal with ourselves, we could add value to for a broader population, not just the PAUSD student population. And I would like to suggest that a subcommittee under the gender equity look at either explore ways that we can proceed in the subsequent year, so it would be a standalone priority next year, or perhaps identify policy changes. This is where I actually have finish my thought process. Recommend activities that we would pursue this fiscal year.
Chair?
Please.
Is this something for, that we can address in a manner at the LGBTQ summit? Because sexual assault, Commissioner Nan brought it up earlier in the discourse about families and their assault being in families, XYZ. Is there some level of education we can do in this forum to even start addressing that part of it?
Yes, I think that would be a direction to that subcommittee for the Project Summit, but I also think it's a standalone, larger issue. Would that be, I don't know if we need I guess we need a second and a vote to.
What's the motion?
I think if you want to make a motion to establish an ad hoc subcommittee, then you would look for a second now.
Why wouldn't we put it on the gender equity?
You could also just add this
Yeah.
work to the Gender Equity Committee, which is already established, so that's fine as well. I did hear, I stated that because I heard language that it would be yet another subcommittee under the Gender Equity, but if that's something the Gender Equity Committee wants to take on, that's fine.
So I would move that we add this work, bullet points number 2 through 4, to the list of responsibilities for the Gender Equity Committee. And if anyone wants to join that committee, because right now it's currently just me, let me know.
It's so large.
Or maybe, Dipali, would you like to join me? So I move to add this task to the Gender Equity Committee with the addition of Commissioner Blonbott to explore avenues to address these issues both in collaboration and independently of the PAUSD, and to bring back recommendations to the Commission for further discussion and consideration.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Do we have any further discussion? We've covered it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? 7-0. Thank you. I think that is really a strong suit. I do have one question. I'm a little confused on the policy programming aspect. We can come back with educational forums, or the subcommittee can come back with ideas for...
Certainly.
Yeah, okay.
Certainly. Where I just have the definition of the word program is something that is ongoing. But the HRC can set up a mini-series of educational conversations as you have in the past. But if you're going to have a program that's every month and so forth that is akin to something that staff would do, that's really outside the purview of the HRC.
Great. Agenda item 4,
Okay.
elections. Do I have a script?
I was going to take that over for you if you don't mind. Great. So I just wanted to go over the protocol for the elections that will be in front of you this evening. So I'm taking this out of the HRC Commission Handbook. So how it works is the current chair explains the general duties and responsibilities of the chair, and including the monthly time commitment. Then the chair opens the floor to nominations for the position, and the commissioners nominate one commissioner at a time. The person nominated needs to be present at the meeting, so that won't be an issue because we have full attendance tonight. And someone can nominate someone else, or you can nominate yourself. The chair then asks the nominated person if they are willing to accept the nomination, and this process continues to happen until all nominations are on the floor. So at that point, the chair closes the nominations, and we go to the ballots. So the ballots we are using are the same type of ballots that the City Council uses. So you will each, Mary will hand them out in a minute. So you will each get a ballot for chair, and it will have all your names listed on it, and your name listed on the top to identify you with the ballot that you are posting. So it's all the names there, but you will make a mark on the person that you would like to support for a position. If there are no names that you wanted to support, you would leave it blank, or you would just put the name of the check mark of the name of the person you will be voting for. Then it comes back to us. We collect it. To have a passing vote, we need 4 members to vote for someone. If it's 3-3, and there's an abstention, it's going to get really complicated, and we'll deal with that as it comes. but that's the way it works. Once that is determined, we go to the process of vice chair. Are there any questions?
And how long will these positions be serving? I know we adjusted the cycle.
It
Back
would be
in
a
summertime.
one-year term till next January.
Okay. And we did that to align with the,
We did that to align with the council. It was for those who weren't here in the past, often we did this in March, or we did this in April and May. So it was kind of an odd sensation that people who were going to be off the commission the next month were voting on people who they weren't even going to serve with, or we've had it before in June. So people who don't even know the people that they're sitting next to were having a vote. So both of those seemed a little awkward. So in dialogue with my colleagues in the department, our department has 3 commissions, and in dialogue with the clerk's department, we thought this was the wisest course of action. So I turn it back to you, Chair Stinger.
Okay, just calls for a brief summary of responsibilities. Very briefly, it's chair meetings. Leadership will set the agenda for the meetings, which is actually, I think, probably the hardest thing to do, setting the priorities for what we can cover and the timing for each agenda item. Is wanting to respect the priorities we've set for the year and respect new ideas and wishes of the commission has to all come down to the leadership setting the agenda. There are also communications with staff, maybe answering specific questions. I think that pretty much sums up with the responsibilities of the chair, being an outward face to the
How many hours?
community. I would say it probably depends on the person. I can spend a lot of time reading and going over things. I think other people might be slower, and many people would be quicker. A couple hours a week, I'll say. I'll open it up first to any questions about the responsibilities and activities of the chair. And then I'll open it up to nominations.
so nominate Valerie Stinger for chair.
Second the nomination.
Oh.
Sorry.
I'd like to nominate Gabe Kralik for chair.
We can go one at a time and see
Okay.
did you accept Valerie and I didn't hear?
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I think I need to, I really like leadership, and I would like to continue in some way, but I think I think we need a new chair. Thank you.
I'd like to nominate Gabe Kralik for chair. He's previously served on the county HRC in leadership, and I think he would be a good leader for the local Palo Alto HRC going forward.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Lee. I think he brings a great perspective, a millennial perspective, as where the community is going to with great passion. And I really appreciate the work he did around with the Ruth Gator Ginsburg film series. I think he'll do a phenomenal job.
Do I need a second first before
You will ask each of those individuals, yes, you need a second, and ask each of these, well, let me look at the thing again. We do this once a year, and I just read it. Let's see. I don't believe you need a second, but you do need the person to say if they're willing to accept the nomination.
Let's go in sequence then. Gabe, are you willing?
I would be willing.
Okay. And then I hear Commissioner Smith and Lee, are you willing?
Yes, I would. do we get an opportunity to make a statement, or how does that work? So I would just say on my behalf, thank you, Coloma, for that nomination. This is my third Human Relations Commission that I've served on in my 12 years of service on local commissions. I've served on 7 commissions total, including chairing a non-Human Relations Commission in Davis. I'm also one of the more senior members of this body, and I think I've learned a lot over the last year and a half from our chair. I think we've had a lot of very productive meetings. I think we complement each other very well in terms of our style and approach to things. And without getting ahead of myself, I would like to see Valerie continue serving in leadership as vice chair, and I think if the commission gave us that opportunity, we would work really well together. And one of my personal goals is just to really empower each individual commissioner to achieve his or her goals for joining this commission. I think, we all take a lot of time out of our busy schedules to serve on this commission, and I want to make sure that at the end of our 3-year terms, that we feel like we've been fulfilled and that we've had an opportunity to work and engage on the issues that we want. I think I've reached out to or met personally with just about every member of this commission, and moving forward, my objective would be just empowering this commission both as a body and individually to achieve our respective goals, and really serving our community and being stewards for making sure that human rights and human relations continues to be a priority. I think oftentimes the city gets busy with sexier topics, and I think it's our responsibility to really be listening to the community and identifying areas where we can make an impact. And so that would be my objective if selected as chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Commissioner Craig?
I don't have anything to add personally. I just want to say that, I've worked with Steve on this last subcommittee, and he's put in a lot of energy, and so everything he said is true. And he's a really hard worker. So if someone elects me, I'd be happy to do my best and bring forward the efforts of everyone too. But I think, in my own thinking as a young member, I think I would like to have Valerie continue. First, because I think she does a great job of welcoming people. She has spent a lot of time drinking coffee. And I think she favors scones over at Ada's Cafe. That is an important thing. So I just want to say nice things about those two individuals, because it was a real privilege to work with them on this report, which they were the prime movers behind. So that's all I wanted to say.
Winka, staff?
Is there more people that want to run?
You could have that. I marked this wrong. I feel like I failed.
Just put it on right and push official.
Yes.
And Steve, I feel young that you are the senior person.
You got to be like 18, don't you?
I am 30 now, so I feel pretty old.
just want to make sure we get it right. I hope you can understand.
I'm not very good at spreadsheets either.
So it was a 4-3 vote with 4 votes for Commissioner Kralik and 3 votes for Commissioner Lee. So takes 4 votes for something to pass. So Commissioner Kralik, congratulations. So now,
While I still have the gavel, if I can, before I turn it over to you, I just want to express how much the work of this commission means to me, and how much respect I have for each of the commissioners and staff. Minka and Mary are brilliantly professional and kind, and a font of knowledge and responsiveness to make things happen. Each of the commissioners, Commissioner Brombaugh, your passion for teenagers is remarkable and brings so much to this commission. Commissioner Shi, your questions are so direct and so helpful in moving the topic forward that I'm just so impressed with your insight and wisdom. Commissioner Lee, we have got some work to do on our summit, and I know that we will continue to work well on that. You are just the history and benchmark, and what you do for the HISRAP agencies, the way you represent them in the community and see them going forward is brilliant.
Thank you.
I appreciated your insight, Commissioner Kralik, on our summit, and on so many of the pieces. You have a lot of depth that you bring, and it's just like going to the fountain of knowledge. And we have a lot of history, Commissioner
we do.
Smith, and I'm looking forward to more community conversations and being productive
Thank
in
you.
that regard. So I will give this gavel to you, and we tell you to take good care of us and keep us going forward. And I'll take my ballot with me.
Where are you headed?
It's your seat over there, Don.
Don't we switch?
No, we don't
we
have to
can
do
just
that.
go like this for now.
Okay.
So Commissioner
Sure.
Chair Kralik, if you would lead the conversation for the nomination of a vice chair.
I don't know what the vice chair does, so I will call on Commissioner Onan to dictate a little description of it and her efforts.
All right, thank you so much, Chair Kralik. So the role of the vice chair is basically twofold. One is to support the chair and work with city staff on planning the agenda for each HRC meeting. So that's a commitment of once a month, either attending or phoning into an agenda planning meeting. Second, the vice chair stands by and pitches in to run the meeting in the event that the chair is absent. So the responsibilities are fairly limited, but it's a great learning opportunity to understand how the HRC plans its agendas, chooses its directions, and works with staff.
Okay, do I hear any nominations for the vice chair position?
I nominate Commissioner Lee for vice chair.
And Steve, are you willing to serve
I'm
as
willing
the
to
vice
serve.
chair?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I'd like to nominate Chi-Feng Chue for vice chair.
Commissioner, are you willing to serve?
Well, that's very surprising. As every commissioner here knows, I'm the junior one, so this is the first public position I served. As you guys can tell, typically I don't speak too much. I'm not a good speaker, so I'm willing to serve. However, when I compare to all our commissioners, I feel I may be a little bit green. As I said, I'm willing to serve. Also, I want to support our team. So at this point, I cannot say no. So that's the only answer I give you. So go ahead.
Okay, a very short answer. I guess you're saying you are willing to serve. And we'll move forward if there's other nominations. Okay, we have 2 nominations, and I guess we'll proceed to vote.
Yes, I believe Mary already handed them out to you. Okay.
Okay.
Like there should be music.
But I don't like music, so we don't have music.
Jeopardy music, perhaps? Jeopardy music?
Probably rather have old music, but not appropriate for a vote.
So this was also a 4-3 vote with Commissioner Shui being elected as vice chair. Congratulations. So now you continue with the agenda, Commissioner President.
Okay, so
I'm sorry.
we have the reports from officials, starting with the commissioner reports, and if a commissioner would like to speak, just put on your light and I'll call on you, okay? Commissioner Smith.
Excellent.
Okay. It's a quiet night, and we're going to go ahead with Commissioner Onan.
Thank you. So I've been serving on the Age-Friendly Committee for some time, along with Minka, and we do have some interesting proposals on the table for how to increase a feeling of community among the seniors in our population. And so we are looking at partnering with local cafes and with the YMCA to create coffee clutches. We're considering doing storytelling events to get seniors to come out and tell their stories of interesting things that have shaped their lives and possibly involve youth in trying to capture those oral memoirs. So I'm excited to see some of these projects come to fruition in the new year, and we'll definitely be inviting the rest of the HRC to attend when these things get launched. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Stinger.
My report is twofold. I attended a National Immigration Forum out of many one, which was done by a national organization and is probably not specifically geared to our questions about the immigrant population, but I think there are some aspects we can learn from, and I will forward this to the subcommittee. And I also attended a county-wide Human Rights Day on December 10th, which was heavily populated by county speakers, and learned a lot about activities in the county. And we'll forward some of these suggestions also to the appropriate committee.
Thank you for attending that. I was a member of the county commission, and they take great pride in that, setting up that day. And I'm glad you were able to attend and meet with some of the other members.
I felt really lucky to attend. It was a great celebration of Human Rights Day. And I do it wrong again. It was a great celebration of Human Rights Day, and I'm always so impressed with the work that goes on in the county, and I think they're planning a follow-up day before next year this time.
Great. Council liaison reports, anyone? It's early in the year. We have new council members, and I don't know if does it happen that new council members might be liaison with
It's possible. The mayor chooses the council representatives to each of to the commissions, and he makes the committee appointments, so that's often late January, early February. We may have our council liaison by the February meeting, but it may not be till the March.
Okay, well, we'll await that with bated breath. And the staff liaison report, I imagine we still have our staff.
That's me.
That's wonderful.
That's good. So a couple things. One is just to call attention to an email I sent you regarding Brown Act training that's coming up 1 or 2 weeks from Monday in the late afternoon. I'm really hoping that you could all make it. It's also been brought to my attention that there will be special training for chairs and vice chairs. That a date has not been set for that, but especially as we have 2 new people in leadership, I think that will be a very valuable training for you two to come to. I also have holiday cards that were delivered, came from La Comida. I'm not sure, it's 4 of the commissioners got cards. I'm not sure what happened to the other 3. They went to City Hall, so they could be floating around City Hall, but it's a holiday card from La Comida. I also would like to show you this. I'm sorry that Kristen O'Kane, the Chief Operating Officer from the Community Service Department, is no longer here. Our department creates a calendar and annual report. This is the 3rd year in which we have done so, and Human Services has 1 page, and your names are also listed, and you're thanked for your service in the back of the calendar, but I wanted to provide you each with your own copy of this beautiful annual calendar that also shares the accomplishments, which are many of what the Community Services Department does and the impact that we have on individuals and families in our community. Those were the 3 announcements that I had.
Okay, Mary, did you have anything? Okay, thank you so much. Tentative agenda items for the next regular meeting. I'm open to listening to commissioners that would like to do that. I see Commissioner Lee.
So as our subcommittee, LGBTQ subcommittee discussed earlier in the week, we do have our policy recommendation that I'd like us to discuss in February.
And I know you have a lot of hard work in that because we went over it in detail and it's very good. And looking forward to the presentment to everyone. So that is certainly worth it. Does staff have any thoughts about the next agenda, or is that something that we can work on together after the meeting?
We definitely always work on after the meeting, and if there's things pending, Mary already has them on the list, so I don't see that she had anything. I think what's always helpful is a continued conversation on the work plan item, and Mary and I will have to go back if there are any items that come on an annual basis or a semi-annual basis that we might have forgotten about. So it's February. You can expect in the March meeting probably to hear back from the CDBG recommendations, and March, April for the HISRAP funding recommendations, when those two subcommittees get working with HISRAP. Sorry, Patrick. The HISRAP applications are due next Thursday, so then we'll have a better idea. And please raise your hand if you're on the HISRAP. 1, 2, 3, and then CDBG. 1, 2, 3. Have you heard yet from? No, you have not heard yet from the planning department. Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll be hearing first in the next couple weeks.
Another agenda item that I'd like the commission to consider in February, Project Sentinel's contract to administer the mediation program. It's a 3-year contract, comes up for renewal in June. So I'd like us to consider forming a ad hoc committee at the February meeting to discuss what, if any, recommendations we may want to make in light of that opportunity. Again, it could also be no recommendation, but...
Right. Commissioner Lee, I will need to check with my leadership if there is a role that is afforded to the HRC as far as that is concerned.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure that there is. So I will, once I find that out, I will share that with leadership.
Okay. Or will you let me know as well?
I will certainly let you know,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
Well, the excitement is palpable. Let's carry on, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Thanks, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.